Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to the 9th episode of the series, The Ledger. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode of this series in which the victims are cursed and turned into animals. You can also support us by liking the video and leaving your lovely comments. Enjoy the show.
Vanity, dear reader, is not the love of being beautiful. It is the belief that other people exist to notice. I have written misers who hoarded gold and tyrants who hoarded power, but the vainest of my entries hoard something far more perishable: adoration. They collect hearts the way lesser collectors gather porcelain for display, never for use. Tonight, I have been carried into a glittering penthouse ballroom, past chandeliers and champagne, and I am watching the finest collector of them all descend her marble staircase. This is entry number 9. Her name was Celeste, and she was the most adored woman in the city, a fact she found neither flattering nor surprising, but simply correct. Platinum-haired, ice-eyed, draped in black and diamonds, she hosted the season's most coveted gala every year and regarded every guest as inventory. Watch her there, accepting a gift from a gentle young man in round glasses who had loved her, quietly and hopelessly, for years. She took the box without once looking at his face. "People are ornaments, darling," she liked to say. "The art is knowing when a piece no longer suits the room." He had stopped suiting the room some time ago. He simply hadn't been told. Her gift table groaned under the season's tributes: silver paper, silk ribbon, devotion wrapped and stacked like cargo. And there among them, dear reader, lay I. No wrapping, no card. One golden ribbon, tied by no hand she would ever trace. I must confess a certain delight that evening. In all my centuries I have been feared, fled, stolen, and once memorably used as a coaster. But I had never before been gift-wrapped. It felt, if I may say so, festive. She noticed me the way she noticed everything valuable, instantly, and with suspicion that something so fine had come from someone so unimportant. She carried me into her study, slipped the ribbon and opened my pages, and my golden ink rose to meet her, writing her name in a flourish she mistook for calligraphy. Celeste, and beside it, a small sitting cat. And here is what none of my other entries ever did. She smiled. She thought me a clever tribute, a bespoke flattery from some anonymous admirer with taste. She was not afraid. I remember thinking, how refreshing, how efficient. She would walk into this one all by herself. The first change found her back among her guests, and savor this. Dear reader, it was received as a triumph. A photographer's flash burst across the ballroom, and her famous ice blue eyes caught the light like a predator's in the dark. The pupils drawn into elegant vertical slits. The crowd gasped, and then complimented her. Exotic, they said, mesmerizing. What drops was she using? Celeste smiled and accepted their adoration. As always, as her due, she thought the curse was cosmetics. She thought damnation was a look. And for one golden hour, the ledger made her magnificent. She moved through her party with a fluid, liquid grace no dancer could have taught her, weaving between guests without brushing a sleeve. Her champagne never trembling. Conversations stopped to watch her cross a room. She had never been more captivating in her life, and she knew it, and she drank it in. That is how I chose to take Celeste, not screaming, but purring. Some accounts are settled with terror. Hers began with applause. Then, mid-laugh at some flatterer's compliment, the applause acquired an echo. A sound rolled up out of her throat, low, rhythmic, unmistakable, a purr audible over the string quartet, vibrating against her diamond choker. The two nearest guests exchanged the kind of glance that ends dynasties. Celeste turned it into a joke, and the party laughed with her, and only I saw her hand tighten on her glass. The collection had begun to inspect its collector. Her hands betrayed her next. Resting on the velvet of her own gift table, her immaculate manicure lengthened, curved, sharpened, fine, translucent claws hooking into the fabric, pulling threads from the tribute table like a cat testing furniture. She snatched her hand back and hid it in the folds of her gown. Too late, of course. I keep meticulous records of hands, dear reader. Hers had accepted 1,000 gifts and returned nothing. It seemed only right they should become hands that could no longer hold anything at all. The ears came in full view of everyone. They rose slowly through that flawless platinum chignon, two soft, pointed cream and brown ears, twitching at frequencies no orchestra plays. A woman pointed with her champagne glass. The murmur that crossed the ballroom was a sound Celeste had never heard directed at her before. Not envy, not desire. Fascination, the kind reserved for spectacle. She had spent her whole life being looked at. This was the night she learned the difference between being admired and being watched. By the staircase, the tail escaped sliding free through the seam of her gown, cream and dark-tipped and horribly alive, curling with a will of its own. She twisted to catch it behind her back like a secret, one slit-pupil eye wide over her bare shoulder, and found half the room already staring. There is a precise moment at every party when the hostess stops being the sun and becomes the exhibit. I have rarely seen it arrive so publicly, or to anyone who deserved it quite so much. And then the room did what rooms always do. It stepped back. The entire glittering circle of her collection, the admirers, the flatterers, the hopeful and the bought, drew away from her in one slow ring, whispering behind hands, raising phones. Celeste stood alone in the center of her own marble floor, ears flat, claws bared, tail lashing, and understood for the first time what her ornaments were for. They were mirrors, and every one of them was now reflecting the same thing, something beautiful and strange, and no longer one of them. So she ran. The queen of the season fled her own gala down her own corridor, gown streaming, one black heel abandoned on the marble behind her like a fairy tale told backwards. In the old story, the girl loses her slipper at midnight and a prince comes searching. But Celeste, dear reader, had spent her life being the midnight, not the girl. No one came running after her. She left 100 guests and 1,000 gifts behind her, and not one soul followed her out of the light. She came for me, of course, they always do, near the end as though the account could be argued with. She hunched over my pages in the study, her arms cream-furred to the shoulder now, dark points climbing her fingers, and she hooked her new claws into my parchment and pulled with everything she had left. My pages glowed, serene, and did not tear. They never tear, my dear. Ink dries, names hold. The only thing in that room coming apart was her. Her face was last, and her face was the point. The cream fur swept up over that porcelain complexion, the dark mask settling across her nose and cheekbones like a masquerade she could never remove, whiskers unfurling, her small nose turning soft and dusky. And through it all, her eyes, those celebrated ice blue eyes, remained exactly, perfectly her own. I left them untouched deliberately. Beauty was never her crime. Every mirror in that penthouse would have forgiven her. It was the coldness behind the blue that had filled my page. Then the black gown breathed in and folded to the floor, and the diamond choker slid from a throat grown too small to wear it, ringing once against the marble like a dropped coin. Platinum hair poured down and became cream fur. The whole magnificent architecture of Celeste, the posture, the silhouette, the entrance that silenced rooms came down in 3 heartbeats, the way all displays come down when the exhibition closes. What remained on the floor was silk, diamonds, and the shape of a very small animal finding its feet. Out from under the hem of her own gown stepped a Siamese cat. Slender, cream-coated, dark at the ears and mask and paws, moving with the same regal grace the woman had owned that, at least, the ledger let her keep. Beside her on the marble lay the diamond choker, a glittering circle sized for a neck that no longer existed, the first collar she had ever owned, and the last she would ever refuse. She looked at it for a long moment, then she stepped through it and walked on. Even I could not tell you whether that was defiance or farewell. She padded back to the ballroom on 4 silent feet and found it empty. 1 hour. That is how long it had taken. The chandeliers dimmed over abandoned champagne, confetti settling on marble, her lost heel lying by the great staircase where 100 guests had toasted her descent. No one had stayed, no one had searched, the collection had simply moved to another room in another house around some newer, warmer star, a whole life spent curating an audience. Dear reader, and the theater emptied before the final act. She cried out then. Once. What left her was thin and small and utterly feline, a single mew swallowed whole by the marble, and the silence the same hall that had rung with applause for her an hour before returning nothing now, not even an echo worth keeping. I recorded the sound faithfully. It is, in my long experience, the loneliest noise a vain creature can make, a call for attention, in a room that has finished attending. 3 days passed. The invitation stopped arriving on the 2nd. I did not soften for her, dear reader. I never do. But I stayed to watch because the finest part of Celeste's account was never the transformation. It was what the silence did afterward. On the 3rd morning, I found her in the grand hall, sitting very small and very straight on the cold marble, gazing up at the enormous gilded portrait of a platinum-haired woman in a black gown and diamonds, magnificent, untouchable, painted at the height of her reign. She sat before it the way mourners sit at monuments, the ornament queen attending her own memorial. I have stood many of my entries in front of their old lives, but rarely has the frame been quite so literal or quite so gold. And then she did the thing I shall remember her by. She went to the great front doors, sat down on the marble with her tail wrapped neatly around her paws, in perfect posture that she never lost, and she waited, ears pricked toward an elevator that did not ring, hour upon hour, day upon day. Celeste, who had never once waited for anyone, who made senators stand in her foyer and lovers age in her drawing room, kept vigil at her own door like the loyal little creatures she used to step past on other people's staircases. Adoration, it turns out, is only a currency while someone else is spending it. Someone came. On the 3rd evening, the doors opened, and it was him. The gentle young man in the round glasses, gray-suited, white lilies in one hand, worry on his kind and unremarkable face. The one she had discarded most carelessly was the only one who came back to see why the light had gone out. He knelt, and the little Siamese pressed herself against his knee with a desperation that would have humiliated the woman she had been, and he stroked her head softly once, twice while his eyes searched the empty penthouse over her shoulder, calling a name that no longer answered. She received from the hand she had refused the only freely given tenderness of her entire account. He never knew who he was giving it to. He left the lilies on the foyer table and went the way all of them had gone. She followed him to the door and could go no further. One soft paw lifted toward the golden light of the elevator as it closed on his silhouette, her enormous blue eyes wet and shining above the whiskers. And that, dear reader, is the exact shape of Celeste's sentence. Not fur, not claws. This to finally understand what a held-out hand is worth. One closed door too late. I wrote the line gently. My hand does not tremble, but there are entries I close more quietly than others. By late afternoon, I was gone. She never saw me leave. She was still facing the front doors. On her study desk, I left only what I had arrived with: a golden ribbon and a little drifting dust in the sunbeam where a book once lay. I do not say goodbye to my entries. We are author and page, and the binding between us is permanent enough without ceremony. But I will admit that as I went, the great hall held 2 portraits of Celeste instead of one, the gilded queen on the wall, and the small blue-eyed shape at the door, still waiting for the room to fill again. Only one of them was honest. And already, dear reader, my ink is stirring toward the next name. Somewhere in this city lives a young woman who is never, ever there when it matters, who slips out of promises the way others slip out of coats, who has run from every hard conversation, every debt, every goodbye, always faster than the consequences. She thinks quite sincerely that nothing can catch her. My next page already holds her portrait, long white ears rising through soft brown hair, a small pink nose, a heart that beats too fast. Entry number 10 is coming, and this one at last will have a reason to run. Subscribe and be here when I open. After all, I would so hate for the next name I write to belong to someone who wasn't watching.